Welcome to Get to the Root, the podcast that's redefining what health benefits should be. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Armstrong, founder and CEO of Root. Here we explore the category we've created, root cause health benefits, a smarter approach that uses advanced lab screening and functional medicine to reverse chronic conditions and lower healthcare costs. Each week, we sit down with forward-thinking employers, innovative brokers, and change makers who are transforming healthcare from the inside out. If you're ready to move beyond sick care and build a healthier future, you're in the right place. Let's get to the root. Welcome back to Get to the Root. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Bethanie Thompson, one of our amazing root physicians, to talk about something we hear frequently when we talk to benefits decision makers. How do you actually get people to change? We'll unpack that question, share how functional medicine works differently than conventional healthcare for employees, and walk through a few powerful stories of health transformations that have saved people and companies time, money, and peace of mind. Welcome, Dr. Bethanie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. You have such a great background and experience as a family medicine physician and before joining Root and practicing functional medicine. So for employers listening, how, from your perspective, is functional medicine different from what their people are experiencing today in the traditional health system?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I practiced family medicine for about 15 years before coming to Root. I really loved building relationships and getting to know people over a lifespan, including extended family members and stuff. But I was always sad because one of the main focuses of appointments has to be what the goals of the insurance company wants done at that appointment. So things that are different about functional medicine and specifically what we do at Root is that we take into account what our members' goals are, which seems like it should be obvious. And I'm sure in primary care, doctors really wish they could spend more time on that too. But time is of the essence. You only have so much time with people. It's always a rush in primary care. And the other nice thing about working with people at Root is that we have a lot of time. Our appointments are at least 45 minutes. So that first appointment, we have time to hear their story and to start to think about possible root causes for symptoms by looking at their family history. A lot of people who have autoimmune conditions will have a family history of autoimmune conditions, and it's a clue as to what we need to be looking for there. We look at their timeline of when symptoms develop, and that's really important too, because a lot of people will say, I was feeling fine up until my third baby was born, or there's definitely things that happen during pregnancy that really shift the immune system and micronutrient levels. And so finding out that timeline of when did you last feel well and what changed after that, that gives us a lot of clues on what root causes are. And then that's really the main other difference is that we are looking for root causes in functional medicine and we're seeing, can we actually fix that? Instead of kind of matching a disease state to a medication and then saying, great, let's start this medication. And if it works, you get to stay on it forever. That's kind of more what you do in primary care, which does help people too. But looking for root causes, I feel like people will end up having a lot more kind of like serendipitous improvements in things. If you work on gut health, they'll say, oh, by the way, this skin rash got better, or my energy level improved. And so these are things that really impact people's quality of life and seem to have less side effects and in the long term, less cost. So that's a few things we do differently.
That was a really fantastic summary. Thank you, Bethanie. So once we find root causes, oftentimes, with food as medicine as our first approach, how do you get people to actually start to change their habits? Can you talk about your role, not just as a doctor or dietitian, but really as a motivational interviewer? And what does it look like to guide an employee member step by step instead of just telling them what to do?
Yeah, this is a good question too. And I feel like in primary care, people want to do this too. They just kind of run out of times. But what we do, motivational interviewing kind of involves just finding out how the health problem really affects somebody's life and their daily functioning. What can you not do because of these symptoms? How is it holding you back? Does it decrease your ability to focus at work or at home? Are you out of energy at the end of the day? You can't really enjoy your family or, rest time? Is it affecting mood? Are you up at night because this pain is keeping you up or your mind is keeping you up? And then that definitely decreases your ability to function during the day. So we look at how it affects their life, and then we explore how somebody wants to feel, and we say, if this thing was taken away, what else do you feel like you could do? Or what would you want to add to your life if you had the energy to do it? And then we kind of start to connect the dots, like just make little steps on how can we start moving that direction. So I think that's really helpful. I think a big difference is just being a human being. And, there's multiple touch points. So with our program at Root, some people at the beginning were meeting with them monthly. And so there's just a lot of different ways if something isn't working that we can brainstorm another workaround or a different step to kind of keep heading the right direction. So those are kind of things that help people see the difference. And I think cutting it down into small pieces, we call that habit stacking. If we can link it to something else they're already doing, like if they have a iron supplement they need to take to get help with iron levels, can we say, let's match that up with lunchtime or, things like that just kind of make it so there's less decision fatigue if it's part of their routine. So we're really working on just changing daily routines and seeing if we can make things more simple to eventually get closer to a goal of improving that health issue.
Great. I'd love to bring this to life with some of your real world stories. So let's walk through a few different examples of conditions. One of the most common things that we see is actually anxiety and health anxiety, because the people that we work with have been struggling with symptoms, sometimes for years before they meet with us. And sometimes this leads to kind of bouncing around between specialists and maybe even ER visits. What happens at Root? How do we approach anxiety or health anxiety?
Well, this one's a tricky one because a lot of times people don't come to us saying anxiety is their issue. It might be like, I have headaches and my energy is way lower than it should be, stomach troubles. And so with our process at Root, we usually meet with people and then we get a lab panel. There's always something wrong on the lab panel. Mm-hmm. It's rare to ever see one of those perfectly normal and not like that gives us like a lot of good ideas on what are the next steps to start adding more wellness to their daily routine. And so I feel like as you have curiosity and some creativity to kind of consider possible root causes, you check these things out. And then as we move along, sometimes people end up having a lot of normal lab results, like they thought gut health was really bad, or they thought maybe they were exposed to mold, or they get some testing and we're like, hey, this is actually all normal. This looks great. I think the more normal results too, that's reassuring that maybe, I'm having symptoms, but it's not correlating to actual problems for health states. And then we start to wonder how much is stress impacting it. So that comes up almost for every single person that we meet, that stress is somehow impacting either their immune system or their gut health, their sleep. And so as we look more at that, I feel like after a few visits, people end up saying, I really think I may be struggling with health anxiety. And so it tends to be something that comes up later, but I think it helps to rule out common conditions that they might be worried about. I think sometimes too, their symptoms maybe didn't get fully addressed with their primary care office, again, just maybe because they ran out of time, or you have to focus on what the insurance really wants anyway. And if somebody feels like their issue is not fully explored, they kind of wonder, did that person really hear me? Or are we missing something big and important still? So I think just having time to talk through it and checking out things that are important to that person, that really helps kind of move the right direction and helps us to see how much stress might be contributing there. I have had a few people who, I've got two in particular that I'm working with now who we've been working with them over a year, and I wasn't even seeing this as being on her radar, but one ended up telling me before starting with Root, she had a ton of ER visits and specialist visits and kind of always was questioning what's being missed. And she said, well, since working with Root, I haven't had any of those. I guess it worked, is what she said to me. And I thought, oh, I didn't even know that was a goal here, but awesome. So the therapeutic relationship is really important. And that's part of that, just multiple touch points, getting to know people over time, having enough time per appointment to really dive into symptoms and check them out further. I think that just having that therapeutic relationship is kind of part of the healing. So.
Absolutely. So the relationship plus the time to investigate and then being able to give people answers that they had been waiting for, even if that's these things are okay. And then these are the things, that we did find, and we can start to work with that. Now that we have the answers, we know where to start. So let's continue talking about these. Another chronic issue that we deal with at Root is headaches, very common. And sometimes people end up on multiple medications to try to control their symptoms. What do we do differently in these cases?
Well, our process involves first the first appointment where we gather a lot of information, but then our root cause panel, we have most people do that. And like I said before, there's always something that shows up on there. So I had one person we've been working with for a little while now, and her first goal was getting headaches under control. And I think she said even like since teen years. So this has been going on for decades, and headaches lasts for days. And there have been ER visits over the years where, of course, that's inconvenient and not a great experience to hang out in the ER. And they give you some IV meds that take the edge off, but then the next day you're back at square one. It really wasn't fixed. They just want to keep you from dying, and then go figure it out somewhere else. It's kind of what the ER does. And here's your $1,000 bill, So for this gal, I think we were looking for other things on her lab panel, and we ended up finding an autoimmune condition that's actually very common. And we said, hey, this particular autoimmune condition, we know there's gut health, and gluten can be related to this particular thing. So her goal was headaches, but I was like, hey, my goal is this autoimmune thing. And I think she cut out gluten and then worked on other things for gut health, but that really changed her headaches. So that was another one of those things where I thought we were working on one thing. And she said, hey, by the way, it's been months, I haven't had headaches. And so we ended up finding that was related, which I think is kind of common, where if we work on gut health, that system's really intertwined with so many other systems in the body. And sometimes we're really surprised how much working on gut health ends up helping the whole body wellness. So,
yes. And the ability to see the body as interconnected systems as opposed to kind of siloed in the conventional system. And a lot of times multiple symptoms from multiple body parts are actually coming from one or two root causes, which you just illustrated perfectly in that case study. Let's continue along with autoimmune conditions you just started with. That can also be some of the most costly long-term claims for employers. And the medications do not lead to a great quality of life for people. They have to sometimes get injections, sometimes they sting and cause other side effects. And so how does our approach change the trajectory for someone with autoimmune conditions?
Yeah, for autoimmune conditions. So the immune system is really sensitive to, there's a few root causes that contribute to issues there. We usually think of genetics, so we look first at that, and we really can't change your genetics. But if we know, hey, this happens to everybody in your family, we know there's not really something you did wrong to deserve it. This was something your body was kind of, loaded and triggered and ready to happen whenever an illness or something else triggers the immune system to develop autoimmunity. We know stress is a big contributor. Gut health is really important for autoimmunity. And then how issues with gut health end up impacting the immune system, because so many of our immune cells are right under the surface of the gut lining. They're trying to protect us from dangerous things coming in with food, but they get irritated if there's damage to the gut lining, and they really carry that reactivity to the whole body. And so that can manifest as autoimmunity. Certain micronutrient deficiencies, the immune system really needs certain things to function well. And there's a few that I feel like almost everybody is low in. So getting those things tuned up. So we've got multiple things we think of when we hear about autoimmunity. Yeah. And so sometimes we get started working on that, and then people's symptoms improve. I have some people who've actually just weaned themselves off of their meds. I didn't necessarily recommend that because usually I tell them, hey, functional medicine is kind of complementary. We want you to work with your rheumatologist because healing does take time in functional medicine. I have quite a few people who've been able to do that. Got one gal I'm working with right now. I think she came in maybe close to a year ago. And her issue was really she had this gut issue that wasn't healing. And there was some internal scar tissue there seen with colonoscopies. And she had seen at least 2 GI specialists. A gynecologist was involved. A general surgeon had tried to remove the tissue to get it to heal, and it just wouldn't heal. And so she came to us kind of as a last ditch. Is there anything you can do to help me? And we did her labs, and she clearly had celiac disease, which I know she was checked for with scopes, but nothing showed up then, which I think is a later finding for celiac disease for it to show up on a scope. But her labs were clearly, she had celiac disease. So we started to work on that. She had multiple micronutrient levels that were low, and those are all improving now that her gut lining is being more able to absorb nutrients. I think she said she can tell this thing is starting to heal that she's otherwise had for a few years at this point. And I think recently she threw in like, oh, I have a goal of getting pregnant too. And I thought if she didn't have this thing found, this autoimmune thing, this celiac is a reason for otherwise unexplained infertility for some people. So yeah, I hope this ends up helping more aspects of her life than even what we were thinking we were getting into when she got started with us, with just this non-healing GI tract issue before. So
that story brings up such an important point that differentiates us from other holistic practitioners and your ability to make a diagnosis and catch something that was missed by multiple specialists, even with invasive procedures looking for it. And to take that information and then through our team with dietitians, help her change the course of her health. That was an amazing story. Thank you. So all of them were amazing stories and your fantastic work and the work of our team. And when you zoom out, these stories are about changing individual lives, but they're also about changing the health trajectory of an entire workforce, because you just described 3 of the most common issues that people in general are experiencing and also contributing to, the health of the workforce. So if you were talking directly to a company leader, what's the one message you'd want them to take away about functional medicine for their employees?
I would say not only does working on root causes lower cost for people, but it also boosts their ability to function on the job and their satisfaction with their work. I'm sure if they see that an employer thinks that their wellness and how they feel is important, that's pretty satisfying, and just quality of life in general, to really be able to impact that for employees. That's amazing. So I think that would be important, that it's so much more than cost. And I feel like people have been pretty happy to work with our team for that.
Yes, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experience, your stories. If you're listening and thinking about how this could fit into your company, remember that functional medicine doesn't just treat disease. It can help reverse it, prevent complications, reducing costs, but most importantly, gives your people their time and well-being back. If you're interested in signing up your company to work with Root, you can visit our website, rootfunctionalmedicine.com, and complete the contact form on the For Employers page. Thanks for listening to Get to the Root. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who's ready to rethink healthcare. You can learn more about Root Functional Medicine and our work with employers at rootfunctionalmedicine.com. We'll see you next time, where we'll keep challenging the status quo and getting to the root of what really drives better health.